Hi, welcome to part four, our last of the lectures on the integumentary system. Today we're gonna take a look at the disorders, some of the disorders that affect our integumentary system. The first disorder that we're gonna look at is burns that occur on the skin. Different things can cause burns. Usually, when you think of burn, for most people, the first thing that comes to mind is touching a hot surface. So, heat is one of the things that can cause burns. In addition to heat, though, there are other things that can cause burns on our skin. Friction burns, for example, if you've ever gotten like a rug burn, the heat that's created when you have friction against the skin. Chemical burns, if you've ever spilt some kind of chemical, a strong acid or a base, for example, on your skin, you may have gotten a burn. Also, from electricity, you can get burns from electrical current. And probably the burn that we've all experienced at some point, a sunburn, which is burns from ultraviolet light. Or other types of radiation can also cause burns besides UV light. UV white light is probably just the most common cause. So we have commonly referred to first degree, second degree, and third degree burns. Now, there are, I don't think your textbook mentions it. I had a student one time who was like, I saw pictures of a fourth degree burn, and I was like, I don't really know much about this. So I looked it up, and I guess there is a fourth degree classification, but it involves skin being burned down to the bone. And then after I started reading about it, I quickly regretted it because the pictures were pretty gruesome of the fourth degree burns, and to be honest, most of the pictures that I saw were on cadavers. But we're going to look at the first and second and third degree burns. So the first degree burn, which is the first picture up here, if you look at the picture of the skin, right, so we can see the epidermis, the dermis, and our subcutaneous tissue there. First degree burns, what you're going to see is damage to the epidermis only. So only the epidermis is actually affected by a first degree burn. It's going to hurt, it's going to be red, you're going to have pain, you're going to have swelling. Those are the signs associated with a first degree burn. Second degree burns. Our second degree burns, the big difference between them and the first degree burns is the occurrence of blistering. So you can see blisters here on the skin. In this picture here, you can see blister, which is fluid that is going to be trapped there between the layers of the skin, between the epidermis and the dermis. So it still has the redness, it's still painful, it still has swelling like the first degree burn, but it's also going to have the blistering, that trapped fluid. So it's damage to the epidermis and also the upper part of the dermis. And then the third degree burns, our 3rd-degree burns are also called full thickness burns. They're going to involve destruction of the epidermis. So you can see in the picture here that the epidermis is gone. Some of the dermis has also been destroyed. We're going to have damage to nerves, fluid loss, which can lead to dehydration and shock if it's a large amount of the body that has suffered the burns. In order for this to repair, so because we've lost the epidermis, right, we have lost those stem cells for our skin down here in the stratum basal. So in order for this area to heal properly, we have to graft skin, take skin from another area of the body and bring it here to fill in the area so that the skin will heal. So that's first, second, and third degree burns. On the next slide, we're going to take a look at some pictures of these 3 types of burns. And if we take a look at them and think about what classification they would be. This first one over here, I'll admit that I've been the recipient of this one a few too many times, especially when I'm vacation, when I'm vacationing somewhere closer to the equator, and I momentarily forget that the sun's rays are a lot more direct down here. That's a first degree burn. So redness, pain, swelling, but you don't see any blistering. The second picture here. Now, this was actually a chemical burn. You can see it's on the back of the calf area. And you can see large fluid-filled areas. Right, so that would be a second-degree burn. A little less gruesome over here. We have another second-degree burn. Now, the redness is not as pronounced in this picture because this person has a lot more melanin in their skin. But you can see the blistering, so that is also a second-degree burn. And then down here, this is an area, it's a little hard to tell. This is the hand, but this is an area that has damage to both the epidermis is gone, the dermis. So you can kind of see the border of like where you have intact skin in a few areas. But the rest of this is maybe kind of around the edge here. You can see kind of some intact skin. But in this area, we have third-degree burns where the epidermis is gone and we've damaged the dermis. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to take a look at is the rule of nines. And the rule of nines is how we determine what percentage of a person's body has been burned. And this is important for determining treatment and for a patient that has had a burn. If you have a patient's considered to be a critical burn patient if they have more than 25% of their body covered in second-degree burns or more than 10% covered with third-degree burns. So just a small area of the body with third-degree burns can be detrimental to a person, and they need to be treated because they can have great fluid loss, they can go into shock, and they can die from having third-degree burns on their body. So the rule of nines splits the body up into different areas, and different areas are totally random. So in the middle of recording this, I just paused it, which you probably tell there's a little hiccup. But there was a bee kind of trapped in my window in front of me, and so I wanted to let it outside, so that it wasn't like distracting me the whole time that I was teaching about burns here. So different areas of the body account for different percentages of our overall surface area. So for example, each of the arms, you can see, are worth 4.5%. Our head, so the front half anterior is 4.5%. So the whole head, both the anterior and posterior, would be 9% of our body. The trunk, the anterior, is 18%. If you were to add the posterior, which is another 18%, the trunk together make up 36% of our body. So, for example, if we had a patient with burns on their anterior left arm, so their anterior left arm here, just the anterior side, is going to be 4.5%. Then they also have burns on the right side anterior face. So anterior face, let's kind of split our face in half, right side. So the whole face would be 4.5%. So half of that would be 2.25%. And then right upper trunk. So if we were going to split her trunk maybe into half, and then in half again. So we have 4 areas. The right upper, this area of the body. So the whole trunk is 18%, so half would be 9, and then half of that again would be about 4.5%. So 4.5% plus 4.5% plus 2.25%, so the total burn of her body is 11.25%. So if these were third-degree burns, this would actually be enough to put her in that critical category. If they're second-degree burns, she would be below that threshold. So how would this look different in an infant? This map is actually for adults, right? For young children and infants, think about what part of their body is actually quite a bit bigger proportionally than an adult. So when you look at kids, what do they have a really big head? Yeah, a really big head. Newborn babies, small, like if you look at a 2-year-old, their heads are really big for their body because their head grows fast and the rest of their body has to grow into it. So the same map is actually different for children. So for infants and young children, the head actually accounts for a larger percent. So in this adult one here, it's 9%. So the number is actually going to be higher if you looked at the same map for children. The next disorder that we're going to look at is skin cancer. So skin cancer is the most common form of cancer that we have in humans. If you live to be like the age of like 80 or 85 or something, you have like a 1 in 3 chance of having some type of skin cancer during your life. And 1/5 of all people on the planet will have it at some point in their life, even if they don't live to be in their 80s. There are 3 main types of skin cancer. The first one is squamous cell carcinoma. We'll take a look at those. The second one is a basal cell carcinoma. And the third one is melanoma. And they differ in their mortality, how fast they spread, where they're located on the body, what kind of cells become cancerous. And also the treatment course, depending on what type of cancer you have, differs. The basal cell carcinoma is a pretty slow growing cancer. It can typically be surgically removed pretty easily. It is the most common of the skin cancers. So if you know someone who had skin cancer, it was probably one of these types. It's the least likely to become malignant of the skin cancers. Malignant, mal, means bad. For example, like in Spanish, and it's least likely to become malignant or bad, meaning spread. It occurs in the bottom layer of the epidermis. So if this is our epidermis, right, this bottom layer, if you remember those cells, the babies, right, the stratum basal. So it occurs in the cells of the stratum basal. And so here you can see those cells growing out of control and forming the cancer. The edge of it is sometimes kind of pearly in color around the edge where the growth meets the rest of the skin. You also will see in the center sometimes this area that looks kind of like scabby. That's like the central ulcer of the cancer that sometimes is evident. The next type of cancer is the second most common, and that is the squamous cell carcinoma. And the squamous cell carcinoma occurs on areas of the body that are typically pretty exposed to the sun. So for example, here you can see a large carcinoma on the lip. It can metastasize if it's not treated early, but it's not highly aggressive like the third type of cancer we're going to look at. Typically, the elevations are kind of scaly and red. To me, this kind of looks like a cold sore that's gotten out of control. We find these in areas that are exposed to the skin. So on the face, the top of the head, the part of the hair, the top of the shoulders, our ears, the top of your foot, the backs of your hands. If you look at this picture here, you can see a squamous cell carcinoma. And the cells that are actually becoming cancerous are those squamous cells of the epithelium, which some originate from the stratum spinosum area there. So those are going to be keratinocytes that are becoming cancerous. The last type of cancer is the one that is most likely to spread, most likely to become malignant, and that is melanoma. Melanoma is the most deadly of our types of skin cancer. Like you can probably deduce from its name, melanoma sounds like melanocytes, right? The cells that make melanin. And so this cancer occurs in those melanocytes. It's linked to exposure to ultraviolet light. It's the smallest percentage. Most skin cancers are not melanoma. Something like 1% of skin cancer is actually malignant melanoma, but it is very fast growing. It can metastasize. So when it metastasizes, the cells that have become cancerous are able to spread. So remember melanocytes, right? Here's a melanocyte making its melanin. Here's another one. This melanocyte has obviously gone rogue and started to reproduce out of control. Those are deep in the skin, deep in the epidermis, so they're closer to being able to get into the bloodstream or the lymphatic stream and spread to other areas of the body. So those melanocytes, remember, are in the stratum basal. 1/3 of melanomas are in pre-existing moles on the body, but 2/3 of the melanomas actually are diagnosed in spontaneous areas, meaning that a mole that you didn't have that appeared. So it can occur in either. And once it gets into the bloodstream or lymphatic stream, it can spread all over the body. So there are what are called the A, B, C, D, and sometimes people throw an E in there of melanoma. Of how to detect it. A means asymmetry. So all the pictures on the top are of normal moles or growths, and the bottom ones are the melanomas. It has asymmetrical borders. So if you were to draw a line through it, right, a melanoma is not going to match on both sides. The borders are uneven. So here you can see the border is a nice clear distinction between the mole and the skin. Here it's kind of jagged and discolored. It's kind of hard to tell where the mole starts and stops the skin. Normal growth is one color. When you start to see multiple colors in the same growth, that's a sign of melanoma. Diameter, if it's something that's larger than 1/4 of an inch, that's a characteristic of melanoma. So if you measure the width, diameter of your mole. And then changes, so evolving is E. So if you have a mole and you watch its growth and you see that it begins to actually change color, shape, size, or a brand new mole, those can all be signs of malignant melanoma. The last disorder of the skin that we're going to look at is albinism, which is an interesting one, and you may have remember learning a little bit about it in general biology because it's an example of a trait that is inherited. It's a recessive disorder, and so a lot of times this is used as an example of recessive inheritance in genetics. So to recap real quick, remember we have 2 copies of every gene in our body, right? And when we reproduce, one of these gets passed on, right? And so when these genes reshuffle and come together with the genes of the person we're reproducing with, we can have different outcomes. And you probably remember doing Punnett squares, calculate probabilities. So here we have a mom who's a carrier for albinism and dad who's a carrier for albinism. So since it's a recessive disorder, right, neither the mom nor the father in this case would have had albinism themselves. But because they both carry the gene, they have a 25% chance of having a child who carries both copies of that recessive disorder and having albinism. They have 50% chance of having a child that is a carrier that carries the gene, and then they have a 25% chance of having a child that doesn't have the gene at all, does not carry it, and does not have albinism. Now, albinism, there's different forms of albinism actually, but the most common one is called oculocutaneous. And there's like 7 different genes that can be affected. All of the genes are OCA genes, like OCA1, OCA2, OCA3. And those genes control the production of an enzyme that's needed for the production of melanin. So if that gene is damaged, the enzyme isn't produced. If the enzyme isn't produced, then melanin doesn't get produced correctly by the melanocytes. So they have very little to no melanin production. So therefore, the pigmentation of the hair and the skin and also the eyes can be affected. And it also affects, in addition to not having melanin in the skin and your hair looking pale, it also affects the functioning of the eyes. So there are a lot of eye problems that are associated with this type of albinism. And so that's it for disorders of the skin. And that also finishes Module 3 on the integumentary system. There are also lots of other disorders that you can read about that are interesting in your textbook too, related to the skin. That's it. Bye.